This episode of Gather and Go is sponsored by Coastal Mississippi. Play Coastal Mississippi. 62 miles of shoreline, outdoor adventures, casinos, fishing, and fantastic food. Perfect for fun-filled itineraries. Visit coastalmississippi.com and go have some fun for fun's sake. Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I'm your host, Brian Jewell. I am totally jazzed that you decided to spend some of your time with us today. And as always, our promise to you is that we're going to do everything we can to make that investment of your time worth your while. Now, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you might know that every now and then we like to get a little bit geeky here on the Gather and Go podcast and talk to some really smart people about the work they are doing to help you learn ways that you can improve your travel organization, your travel business, your profitability, your results. And today is one of those days, because on today's episode, we have a featured conversation with Milena Nikolova, who is a behavioral economist who specializes in travel and tourism. If you're not familiar with behavioral economics, it is a fascinating field that has been developing over the last 20 years or so. It gives us a lot of insights into why people behave the way they do, why they make the spending decisions they do. And Milena has a lot of interesting things to tell us about how we can use her emerging field of science to build better trips, help people form better memories, and make travel more sustainable in the process. I can't wait for you to hear that conversation. First, though, let's get into some travel news you may have missed. Hotel occupancy is rising and falling at the same time. There's a notable split in the sales trends for hotels in the U.S., according to commercial real estate analytics firm CoStar Group. And that divide, they say, is along economic lines. According to CoStar, for the first 5 months of 2024, luxury hotel occupancy was up 1.8% over the same period in 2023. In the economy hotel sector, however, occupancy fell by 3.4%. The CoStar analysis pointed out that this separation is unusual because hotel occupancy typically rises or falls among all sectors in tandem with broader economic trends. And while a slow-growing supply of hotel rooms has led to increased prices across the board, the current trend seems to be mostly impacted by discrepancies in demand. Demand for luxury hotels was up 5% in the first 5 months of 2024, said Jan Freitag, CoStar's National Director of Hospitality Analytics. He went on to say demand for economy hotel rooms was down 4%. This year's divergence suggests that inflation and other issues are hitting budget travelers much harder than their luxury counterparts. Well, now it's time for the road tip segment of our show. This is the part of every episode where we reach deep into our bag of travel knowledge from decades on the road and bring you tips that will help you make your next trip less stressful and more successful. I'll never forget the time a few years, actually many years ago, when I was on a trip with a tour operator and a bunch of normal passengers. And on the very last night of the trip, I saw the tour director get in a shouting match with one of the male passengers from that trip. And fortunately, I was able to kind of intervene and help cool the situation down a little bit. But once I finally asked everybody what was going on, I realized that that shouting match was about the tour company's post-trip survey. The tour director was asking everyone on the trip to fill out a survey on that last night and hand it in before they left. And this one particular passenger, he just didn't want to do it. He felt like it was homework. He felt like as a customer, he shouldn't be told or forced to do something he didn't want to do. And he made his opinion known to the travel director, the tour director. And that is what led to the confrontation. You know, I was thinking about that earlier today, and it got me thinking about trip surveys. Now, of course, surveying your customers is a very important and very helpful way to get feedback on your products and experiences, maybe on your marketing, maybe on your team members, and figure out how you can optimize your operations and improve and grow in the future. But as I thought back on the fight that happened that night, I thought, there are some good ways and not so good ways to handle your post-trip surveys. So here are some best practices around those post-trip surveys. Number one, you need to make those surveys voluntary, because I think the passenger on that trip had a very good point. He had paid money to be there. He was on vacation. It was completely unreasonable of the tour company to demand that he do homework on the last night of the trip and turn in a survey before he left. If you make your surveys voluntary, you're more likely to get honest feedback from people versus if you really pressure your customers to turn them in, especially turn them in writing before the trip is over, you're not likely to get really good, thoughtful, honest answers. You're going to get a lot of answers from people who are just checking boxes, trying to get through a task. Next up, don't tie staff compensation or reviews to the number of surveys they collect on a trip. When I think about that tour director, I think he was probably in a situation where his superiors at the tour company required him to collect as many surveys as possible. They may have even required him to collect surveys from every passenger. And that's probably why he was so stressed out about this one particular man who didn't want to turn one in. And that's probably what led to the conflict. Now, you can definitely use survey data to inform the way you deal with your employees, to train them, to reward them for great work. But if you put them in a situation where their compensation or their job security relies on collecting a certain number of surveys, you are putting them in jeopardy. You don't need to do that to get the data that your company needs. Next up, if you're going to ask for surveys during the trip, you need to give people ample time to complete them. One of the problems with that situation that led to that fight is that the entire group was given the survey, an hour or two before that happened on the very last night of the trip. And so there really wasn't enough time for people to collect their thoughts, to give thoughtful answers, to fill out the survey at their own leisure. They were rushed to fill out a multi-page survey within an hour or two. And it's no wonder that created some stress. So what we have found a better solution to that problem is to tell people at the very beginning of the trip that you're going to have a survey. And if it's something you have in print, actually hand it out to them at the beginning of the trip. That way they can jot down notes and responses and answers as they go, as the thought strikes them, as they have some free time to complete the survey. And you're going to get better responses and you're not going to stress people out. But I would also encourage you to maybe think about getting away from that handwritten survey form and using some technology instead. There are tons of online survey tools out there. Some of them are free. Some of them are very, very low cost and high quality. You could also do something cool by sending out your surveys via text. You can even ask people to answer one simple question via text message here or there 3 or 4 times during a trip. So maybe you can arrange things to where when you finish a certain activity or a certain day, people automatically get a text message from you or your group texting service asking, hey, rate the experience you just had on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 or something like that. People simply reply with a number to that text. You're going to get instant feedback. It is very low friction. It's a very small ask for people. And you might find much better uptake rates if you do it that way versus trying to collect data from people after the trip or asking them to fill out a questionnaire all at once. Finally, you should consider incentivizing people to complete their surveys. Of course, you want to collect as many surveys as possible to get the best data you can, but forcing people to do it doesn't create good customer sentiment. Incentivizing people to do it, that's a different story. You could offer people a gift card of a certain amount, say $5 or $10 or something like that, if they turn in a post-trip survey. Or if you want them to do it during the trip, you could offer something like an end-of-trip treat, maybe a coffee treat or an ice cream or something like that on the last day, or a Starbucks run on the way to the airport or before the motor coach hits the road, something that you cover the cost of for people who have completed that survey. Or maybe you offer them a discount on future trips. This is a great tool if you want to get people excited about doing business with you again in the future. Maybe you say, hey, if you turn in your post-trip survey, we're going to give you $50 or $100 or whatever of credit toward the next trip you take with our company. So put these tips into practice. You are going to continue to get that good feedback and data you need from your customers, but you're not going to make them angry. You're going to avoid awkwardness and confrontations. That is your road tip of the week. Now, before we move on, I want to give you just a quick reminder from our company. Gather and Go podcast and the Group Travel Leader magazines are everywhere you are on the internet and social media, and we would love to interact with you there. You can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn by searching the Group Travel Leader Inc. Feel free to give me a follow on LinkedIn as well. I'm simply Brian Jewell. On Twitter, or if you insist, X, you can find us at Group Travel Pubs. That's pubs as in publications, not pubs as in bars and restaurants. And finally, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at the Group Travel Leader. I'll put links to all those platforms in our show notes. We would love to have you following along there with us. We post some fun and creative content that you won't find from us anywhere else except on those social platforms. So pick the one that you like best and give us a follow there. We sure appreciate it. Now it's just about time for us to get into our featured conversation with Milena Nikolova. As we do that, I want to remind you that you can find a wrap up of some of the most important things we talk about in the show notes for this episode. And show notes, of course, are the text that you'll find right below the audio player wherever you listen to the show. And after the interview, I want to encourage you to stick around, because when we're done there, I want to come back to this idea of the affordability issue in travel, and specifically how it is affecting the working class. That's going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. You won't want to miss that. We'll be right back with Milena Nikolova.
Let's go, my kiddos! Rise and shine! I am tired of early morning alarms and sitting in carpool lines. I want to relax with a spa day. No more family meetings. I want a family outing. Booked a big one there. My to-do list has taken over. How about a to-dream list instead? First up, play Coastal and go have some fun for fun's sake.
Make a vacation declaration of your own and start planning your escape to the Mississippi Gulf Coast at coastalmississippi.com.
All right, everybody. My guest today is a behavioral economist who has spent years studying the psychology of travelers in destinations around the globe. She's the author of the textbook Behavioral Economics for Tourism and the founder of BehaviorSmart, a boutique consulting firm focused on helping tourism organizations leverage behavioral science to drive innovation and sustainability. Milena Nikolova, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here.
It's great to have you here. You may be the smartest person we've ever had on the podcast. We'll see.
I seriously doubt that. But I hope I'm one of the more interesting ones.
I think so. Your background fascinates me. Behavioral economics fascinates me. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, tell our listeners how you made your way from the academic world into the world of tourism.
So my master's degree, my undergraduate and graduate degree were in human psychology. And it just happened so that my first job, which I started even when I was still at the university, was with an organization which was using a lot of applied psychology to help nurture a culture, the culture, the mindset, and the skills that professionals need in order to work in non-governmental organizations. This is back in the years when my home country, Bulgaria, was transitioning from being part of the socialist bloc to actually going into a market economy and democracy mode.
Wow.
And nobody in the society had the understanding of what is a third sector. There was no third sector. At the time, there was only one sector, and that was the state. So you can imagine that this this project, this effort was actually tasked with basically creating an NGO sector from scratch. And I was absolutely fascinated by the fact that almost the entire team of experts who was working there were applied psychologists. And so they were taking everything that they knew about human behavior, behavior change, in order to help these ambitious people who wanted to be the front leaders of the new NGO sector to have the skills, the understanding, the culture to do that. So that was the first time that I actually decided I want to use somehow in my career psychology in an applied context. This is what drove me to in 2003 to move to the US and start a PhD in the business school of the George Washington University. I was accepted there. I wanted it to be in consumer psychology, not sure exactly where and how to take that apply side to apply it to business. And I started looking for funding. I was looking for scholarships, fellowships to keep me through the 5 years of my studies because I had to leave my full-time job. And I got offered the fellowship with at the International Institute of Tourism Studies, which was housed at the Business School of GW. And it sounded interesting, exciting. It was going to help me go through the program. And the condition was that I made a supporting field of my studies tourism and sustainability. And so that's how I actually made the decision to marry the two fields. I was a novice in tourism and had a little bit of exposure to sustainability, more in the nature protection context. But that's how I started. I joined the two. And actually, when I started taking some of the tourism policy, tourism planning classes, I got even more interested into this because everything that I was learning from the textbooks about how we should make tourism more sustainable actually contradicted what I already knew about changing the minds and the behavior of individuals and groups.
Yeah.
So this is how I kind of married the two.
Yeah.
And then with time, I finished my PhD. I started teaching, but also doing some consulting work. So I actually never completely left the applied world. I continued to do consulting mostly with the World Bank in different projects when I was not teaching, when we were on taking vacations and so on and so forth. And so at one point I decided that I was really fascinated by taking what science kept accumulating as knowledge and somehow helping translate it to the world of professionals, because so much knowledge was staying in journals, in books, and it was not channeling into the industry in a way that could help professionals. While many of the answers that the two worlds were tackling were actually very similar.
Yeah.
So this is how I actually decided to completely leave academia and then use the fact that I actually speak both languages and help bridge to the extent that I can these worlds.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's fascinating. So you started in psychology, and I think a lot of people understand, in general, what psychology is, but I don't think as many people understand the term behavioral economics. So you referenced behavior change. Give us some more understanding of what is behavioral economics. Economics, well, that sounds like money and currency and policy. Behavior sounds different. So what is it, and why should it matter to people in tourism?
So behavioral economics actually is a relatively new field of knowledge, which in the past 2 decades, I would say, has made a real impact to our understanding of societal dynamics. it essentially borrows what we know from behavioral sciences, whether it's human psychology, neuroscience, sociology, and overlays it with the challenges that we face in society, whether they're economic challenges or other challenges, and seeks to first understand why some things are happening, and why we can solve them using conventional rationality. So you have, for example, applications in the context of, let's say, healthcare, where we behavioral economists would tackle questions such as, okay, given that thanks to science, we now have more knowledge than ever about what is healthy living and what we should change about contemporary lifestyle in order to live healthier, better, and longer. Why is it that we have such a hard time changing changing the patterns, and also why do we still see an increasing rate of deaths which are attributed to poor decisions? So people had the option of actually choosing a better outcome, and they didn't. So this is one context. We also have a lot of uses in the context of policy making, where you have social support programs or environmental policies or energy saving policies that do not work. Politicians design them with the thinking that, well, that offers enough benefits, people would pick them up, but actually they don't. Nobody applies, nobody benefits from funding schemes. And so behavioral scientists then come in and try to understand why, what prevents people or what makes them hesitant. And sometimes it turns out that it's complexity, people simply don't understand. Sometimes it turns out that it's a hassle factor. So behavioral scientists and behavioral economists very often find the reason why something is not working properly, and then they help institutions, businesses, or groups of entities to design a solution that actually will not create any conflict with the way that people make a decision in this particular context.
Yeah. So how does this intersect with tourism? Because in the tourism world, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about policy. I know policy affects us, but we don't think about it a lot. But obviously, you work on this every day. So how do these principles affect people who work in tourism?
So the use of behavioral science in tourism is profound. Actually, my dissertation and initial research interest started with how can we use knowledge about human behavior to make experiences more powerful and impactful. We have a lot of knowledge about how memories are created, what makes a memory last longer, what changes memories, what can modify what we remember about past experiences, and so on and so forth. And so to me, it was really a surprise that the tourism industry does not use that knowledge to enhance the offering, the product in the first place. So this is one big domain where some other sectors and some other industries have done a better job than tourism. And I think there's so much potential because tourism is all about connecting people to other people and people to places in a way that then produces memories, experiences that make people happier, that make them better people, and that also create good experiences for local hosts and local communities. The bigger area where we currently see demand for this kind of knowledge is sustainability. We all know that we are at the stage where we know that moving to sustainable forms of operations is becoming non-negotiable. So now the question is how, And we see that many of the things that we've been trying for years, I would say decades, are not working.
Mm.
So the first area where I see that we are making a lot of impact with um, human psychology and behavioral science insight is understanding why some of the things we have been doing for so long are not working, and where are the barriers that block the transition from current practices to more sustainable practices. And then the second part is, of course, what are the ways to design sustainability communications, present sustainability options, so that they actually have higher pickup rate and they don't conflict. Actually, they're not in conflict with the very idea of traveling, and that's the experience.
Yeah. I want to come back to what you said about forming memories, because that was fascinating. But let's follow the sustainability thread for a minute. So there's a gap between what consumers say about sustainability and then what they actually do when they travel. So you have this window into people's minds. Help us understand why that gap exists. And do you have any suggestions for how people might close the gap?
Absolutely. I see that in the past year or two, a lot of professionals in our industry are starting to use the notion of a say do gap or an intentions action gap. The main reason that we see that gap and that it's not going to close in the next 1 or 2 years if we just sit back and keep doing the same thing is that the way that we approach currently sustainability is in direct conflict with the main motivation of travelers. And that's the desire to have an experience. People travel, even the most responsible and committed to sustainability travelers are on the road in a different destination from home in order to learn, engage, smell, sense, taste. So at every moment, sustainability comes in competition with that. It's going to be in second place. This experience will always be prioritized. So this is one of the main reasons. The other reason is that actually people associate sustainability with a sense of responsibility, sense of discipline, sense of sacrifice. There's multiple studies that show that people actually feel that there's direct conflict between thinking about sustainability and being in a state of leisure. So even if at home they think about climate change and the sustainability crisis, when they're on holiday, they park that at the back of their minds, just as many other obligations. And the other thing is that when we travel, we naturally go into a state of releasing discipline. So the same way that I like giving a diet or a workout example, when we are at home, we all have more or less a fairly structured and strict discipline about how many times do we work out during the week, not eating sweets or maybe eating only on special occasions, not drinking during the week, but maybe having a couple of glasses only on weekend nights and so on. But when you go on holiday, of course, you deviate from that. If you're in Italy or Spain, sure, you're going to have wine every day, probably also with lunch. If you are in Turkey or somewhere else where sweets are to die for, surely you're going to eat plenty of them. So the same way, people deviate from their responsible behaviors. Even if at home they recycle diligently, they think about energy consumption and water consumption. When they're on holiday, they don't. They actually deviate from these patterns. So these are all factors that explain why it doesn't come automatic. Now, what can we do about that? Again, of course, there's different nuances and so on. But in general, we say that sustainability has to be made super easy. It needs to be almost an automatic choice because many of the decisions we make are automatic. They're driven by shortcuts. We pull and take water in a plastic bottle simply because at the moment we feel thirsty. We want to keep the conversation we're having or enjoying the view and so on. And this is the closest that's to us. So if it's a glass bottle, we're going to drink from a glass bottle. If it's a plastic bottle, it's going to be a plastic bottle. So making sustainable choices as easy as possible and also as automatic is one of the overarching strategies. The second one is making sustainable choices appealing. The easiest example that I can use to illustrate that is food. Encouraging travelers to buy more local food and to eat more local food during their holiday is one of the most demanded and attractive thing for destinations, for businesses, because on one side, it leaves more spend in the local economy. Mm-hmm. It's channeled to local producers and so on. And then if it's local seasonal food, that also lowers any carbon footprint associated with transportation and imports and so on. So with food, you can either try to promote buying local as a responsible choice or as your way to do the right thing and so on. Or you can simply use smart and creative descriptions to present local food in an appealing way, in an attractive, I would say irresistible way, so that people want to taste it because it's something that's very different from what they can have home, something that's available only 4 or 6 weeks in the year, that overlaps with their stay, something that is prepared in a very different way, unique way to the local place, and so on. So depending on what type of decisions we are talking, we either try to make them easy or more appealing.
Yeah, I love that. So you have also talked and written a lot about how people can leverage behavioral insights to make tourism more impactful in a more positive way for destinations. So for our listeners who represent destinations or who just care about that sort of thing, what are some ways, in addition to maybe promoting the local foods, what are some ways that they can make sure they are really making that positive impact on the destinations they visit without being overbearing in how they do it?
Let me illustrate in practical terms. I can give you a couple of examples. So imagine that you're a destination and you have a destination app, and your destination app seeks to, of course, promote visitation and so on. But you also want to use that app in order to influence where travelers go, what activities they choose. And ideally, you want to, for example, get people to venture out and away from hotspots. You want to encourage them to buy more local. You want to excite them about seasonal meals and seasonal foods and so on. How you can do that effectively so that it actually works using the technology that you already have in place is a perfect task for a behavioral scientist or for a behavioral scientist and a destination professional. We've done work like that where we would sit down and just help destination professionals figure out, okay, how can I use what I already have in order to, for example, get people to visit the many attractions that are around our city, but they somehow are in the shadow of some of these popular churches or sites that everybody wants to see. So we help them think through why people go to these most popular sites. What is the main reason? In many cases, it's just because, well, everywhere they check, this is what they see as suggestions. Okay, well, can we change that? Can we show them that actually there's a less visited spot that actually reveals more about the local culture, or there's a culinary experience or tour that will tell them a little bit about the living culture, but it also will give them a taste of the local cuisine without them having to navigate and figure out and so on and so forth. So this is one example. Another example from our practice comes from one of the regions in Sweden, in Skåne, where the local tourism authority wanted to ensure that the events industry, so not the leisure sector, but the events industry, actually relies more on local food and showcases more of the local traditional foods in Sweden and in the region, but also the food that and the offerings that are available through local sourcing. And so with them, we sat down and help them understand, okay, how do people who come at events make choices about food, and where can we change the way that we present the options so that we make it very easy for them to go more for the local option rather than the traditional international imported foods that they can have anywhere, whether they're in Sweden, Spain, or Germany. So these are two examples showing how you can use knowledge first to understand why something is happening in a way that is creating a challenge for the destination, and then what might be the solutions that gently and without any frictions can actually steer travelers and traveler flows in a desired way, so that there's more spend that stays in the local economy. There's better spread of the benefits of tourism, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. That's so smart. So a lot of our listeners are tour operators or people that plan tour experiences, and I would love for you to share a little bit of your insights about memory creation for them, because they're in the business of creating memories for their travelers. So what can you tell them about how memory creation works and how they can maybe hack it a little bit to make those memories better, longer lasting, more positive?
Absolutely. Well, I would focus on, because there's many aspects of memory creation. I want to focus on one thing that I know we discuss very often with tour operators, with people in the hospitality industry, both hotels and food service providers. And that's the fact that our contemporary culture of multitasking and living fast actually has reduced our ability to enjoy ourselves and to benefit from holidays. And what happens is that in many, many situations, people are on holiday, but they somehow slide on the surface of it and they do not connect to the place. They do not connect to other people. They do not learn. They do not appreciate. They just are there. And that does not help them. They don't go home well rested. They don't go home enriched. And also, they don't leave the best footprint behind, because they haven't learned, they haven't gained respect, they haven't talked or appreciated locals, local culture, and so on and so forth. So to me, one of the biggest contemporary challenges that tourism professionals, tour operators, or anyone who has influence over touch points along the journey can tackle is making sure that people actually leave digital devices on the side and mindfully connect to where they are. Maybe not all the time. Obviously, we know that many people try to balance traveling and leisure time with the fact that they have a business going and they need to keep it on, and so on and so forth. But even if they manage to get people to appreciate, to notice a flower, sometimes it's small things. A guide can do miracles just by planting moments of mindfulness throughout the story that they're telling, making people stop and appreciate the view for a moment, making people pay attention to a flower or an unusual tree. If they see that people constantly use their phones, make people stop and take a photo. Um, just to nudge them to actually slow down and enjoy these moments of appreciations of connecting to their surroundings. So these moments sometimes an unusual noise, an unusual sight, an unusual taste can be the most long-lasting memories that people take home and remember for much longer than many of the other things that happen to them. So this is one of the things. Another piece of advice that we offer very often is to plug into the itinerary sort of recollection moments at the end of each day, where you invite people, ideally at a nice space where they're staying, maybe if it's nice weather, if it's a good view at a terrace or some space, just to sit down, maybe enjoy a glass of lemonade or a glass of champagne and just talk about how the day went to the person they're traveling with or to somebody else who's in their group, just to talk about what impressed them most, what was really interesting or new or different. That helps people sort of process the day rather than just stack experience after experience. And then by day 7, they can no longer make sense and sort of pull the separate episodes. So small adjustments to the itinerary like that can enable and facilitate memory creation and more mindful processing and connection of the with the experience that people are having, and prevent them from really doing that superficial thing of just missing on the opportunity to extract the maximum.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love that so much. I'm going to have to make some changes in the way I travel based on that insight, but that is so good to hear. So for people that would love to follow you, learn more about you, get plugged in with Be Smart, how should they do that?
Thank you. Well, the easiest ways are to follow me and BehaviorSmart on LinkedIn. We try to be active. We try to post content that's of help and um, interest of different audiences within tourism. I also invite them to go to our website. We maintain a knowledge corner where we try to constantly upload resources, videos, webinar recordings to make them available for a wider audience. So anyone who's interested and just wants to see whether maybe there's something there, whether it's applicable to them, their business, their destination, I would really invite them to go and look at the readings, look at the resources. We have some webinar series which we have produced as part of projects that was funded by the EU, for example. We've made them available. We really try to keep some resources open and widely available to excite professionals about the benefits of understanding a little bit about how human psychology and human behavior insights can help their work and enhance the efforts that they're making.
Yeah, wonderful. We will link to all those resources in our show notes. Now, before we let you go, we have a few questions we ask everybody, and these are just for fun, so no pressure. First question, when you travel, do you book a window seat or an aisle seat?
Window seat.
Yeah, why is that?
It gives me the sense that I'm close to bigger space. And also I'm actually pretty curious. And every time that the view is not covered by clouds, blocked by clouds, actually I'm curious to look from the window and just see what I can experience from up in the air.
So what's something in your carry-on that you would never travel without?
Comfortable shoes.
Mm.
I love walking. I feel that walking is the best way to experience a place. But every opportunity I have to just experience a place I happen to be visiting, just put my walking shoes on and I just walk the streets. I don't go, especially if I don't have time, I might not go to museums or the key sites, just walking the streets. So that would be the one thing that I always try to have.
Yeah, very smart. So if you had a free airline pass and a week with nothing else to do, where would you head next?
Oh my God. I have been dreaming for some time, basically since we launched BehaviorSmart, which for those who are entrepreneurs know how intense it can be. I've been dreaming of doing a yoga retreat, ideally in India. So that probably would be my choice. Just unplugging from everything and doing the maximum of what I was just describing. Connecting, slowing down, and releasing everything that modern life imposes on us.
Beautiful. So the last question, what is one thing you have seen or done on the road that you wish you could go back and experience again with somebody you love?
Actually, I would say that experiencing places and generally having experiences with people you care about is probably the highest form of enjoying an experience. So there are many places that I get to visit as part of my work where I hope that I can go back and visit with my husband, my children, some of my closest friends. So I can't name one, but every place where I've been for work that has fascinated me, I would love to go back to.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a pleasure, and we'll have to have you back sometime to dig into some more of your insights.
Absolutely.
Well, I sure hope you enjoyed that conversation with Milena as much as I did. Now, I got to tell you, there was more to that interview than we had space to include in the podcast. Fortunately, it is all available right now on our YouTube channel. Just go over to YouTube and search Gather and Go with Brian Jewell. It will show up right there, or I will drop the video in the show notes for this episode. When you watch, you will hear Milena talking about how the hassle factor impacts human behavior. She's going to go over some of the science that demonstrates why the sustainability gap exists. And she's going to give us her perspective on how you can craft appealing messages that nudge travelers in the direction of behaviors and memories you want them to have. So you don't want to miss that. Check it out on our YouTube channel. Now, there are a few things from our conversation that I want to hit again just to make sure you don't miss them. When we were talking about the power of behavioral science in tourism, Milena said, we have a lot of knowledge about how memories are created, what makes memories last longer, what changes memories. It's really a surprise that the tourism industry doesn't use that knowledge to enhance the product offering in the first place. Some other sectors and industries have done a better job than tourism, and I think there's so much potential. You know, Milena is right about this. I think one of the weaknesses of tourism, and we certainly have many strengths, but one of the weaknesses is that we can be very set in our ways. We get in a rhythm, we get in a routine, we see something that works well, and we have a hard time deviating from it. And certainly if you are a solopreneur or running a small company or a small staff, you might feel like you don't have time to stay on top of all the latest trends or experiment with things coming out of academia. I totally get that. In fact, that's one of the reasons that we do this podcast, is to find that information so that you don't have to go out and get it for yourself. But I would encourage you, when you encounter ideas like this, when you encounter someone like Milena, when you encounter resources like the ones her organization offers, take a few minutes, take an hour, look into it, think about it, and if it seems profitable, then invest the time and effort to try it out in your organization. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. That's how you build a better travel operation and a better future. Now, when we were talking about using behavioral science to help close the sustainability gap in travel, Milena said sustainability has to be made super easy. It needs to be almost an automatic choice because many of the decisions we make are automatic. So making sustainable choices automatic is one of the overarching strategies. And she said the second strategy is to make sustainable choices appealing. Boy, she's absolutely right about this. One of the reasons that sustainability hasn't caught on very well in travel so far is we've done a pretty poor job of positioning sustainable choices as things that are automatic and appealing. I think if we're using my towels in a hotel bathroom, it doesn't sound that great, especially because hotel bath towels tend to be kind of stiff and crummy to begin with. So the idea of reusing them just sounds unpleasant. But if it was a great bath towel, kind of like the kind you have at home, which you certainly don't wash every day or replace every day, if it was a high quality towel, it may be no sweat for you to reuse it. And if it was an automatic choice, you would probably never think about it. So if sustainability is something that is important to you and your travel company, take Milena's advice, look for those opportunities to make those choices automatic and make them appealing. Finally, when we were talking about creating better travel memories, Milena said our contemporary culture of multitasking and living fast has actually reduced our ability to enjoy ourselves and benefit from holidays. In many situations, people are on holiday, but they slide on the surface of it. She went on to say one of the biggest challenges we can tackle is making sure people leave digital devices on the side and mindfully connect to where they are. A guide can do miracles just by planting moments of mindfulness throughout the story they're telling. These moments can be the most long-lasting memories people take home. Well, I got to tell you all, the more I learn about this topic, the more I think about it, the more convinced I am that our phones and other technology, especially what we travel with, may be doing us more harm than good. And so if you really, really want to help people create those long-lasting memories, things they're going to talk about for a long time, Milena is absolutely right. Find ways to convince your travelers to leave their phone on the bus, in their backpack, in their purse, in the room, and just be present in the moment. Will they miss out on some amazing photos? Yeah, maybe. Will there be a text message that has to go unresponded to for a few hours? Perhaps. But you're going to help people really experience the places they came to experience. And they will thank you for that in the long run. Great stuff there from Milena Nikolova. Well, we talked earlier in the episode about how the slump in economy hotel sales might be indicating that inflation and high pricing and other factors are really making it difficult for budget travelers to enjoy travel right now, especially the way they would like to. You know, I have been thinking a lot about this and the question of whether the high price of travel is starting to make travel opportunities inaccessible, especially to the working class. And that's going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. Yeah, that's right. The Hot Minute is the portion of the show where I take 60 seconds to give you my unfiltered thoughts on an issue impacting tourism every day. And today we are talking about travel and pricing and the working class. So let's put 60 seconds on the clock and get into it. When I was a kid, my family didn't have a lot of disposable income. But when the opportunity came to take school or church trips, I was always able to cover the modest costs through fundraising and odd jobs. Those travel experiences became absolutely foundational to the person I am today. But based on the economic trends we're seeing now, I'm concerned that those opportunities are becoming inaccessible for too many people. More and more Americans simply can't afford the rising price of travel. That's bad news for our industry and bad news for our young people. Now, I am a strong believer in free markets, but I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong here. I don't have the answers to travel's affordability problems, but I think it's time to raise the alarm bell. Because travel shouldn't be so expensive that only the rich can afford it. If our industry loses the working class, we risk losing our soul along with it. That's the hot minute, or call it minute and, 2 or 3 seconds. That's how I see things anyway. Of course, as always, you're welcome to disagree with me, and we can still be friends. And hey, whether you agree or disagree, we would love to hear from you. You can send your thoughts, opinions, ideas, rebuttals, questions, whatever you want to say, to podcast@grouptravelleader.com. I read every email that comes into that address. I love hearing from you. And you never know, your email might just be the topic of the next Hot Minute. And hey, while you're in the mood to give us some feedback, would you do me a big favor? Would you go to your favorite podcast playing app? And if you haven't already subscribed to the show or followed the show, hit the button to do it while you're there. And if you would also go ahead and give us a rating, leave us a review, that is super helpful. And I'm thankful to everyone who has done that so far. My thanks as well to Milena Nikolova for joining us today. On the next episode, I'm going to bring you a really informative conversation with Stacey Berry of Share in the South. She's going to help you understand how you can solve your travel problems with the help of receptive tour operators. You won't want to miss that. Until then, though, remember this. At the end of the day, we're all on this trip together, so let's make it a good one. See you next time on Gather and Go. Gather and Go is hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Jewell. Our publisher is Mac Lacey. Danya Simmons is our creative director. Ashley Ricks is our circulation manager and graphic designer. Our sales team is Kyle Anderson and Talisa Reck. To advertise on the podcast, call Talisa at 859-253-0455. Gather and Go is a production of the Group Travel Leader. For more information about our magazines, podcasts, and events, visit us online at grouptravelleader.com. This episode was brought to you by Coastal Mississippi. Plan your best trip to Coastal Mississippi. Suntime recreation and dinnertime reservations will have you losing track of time with beautiful waterways and seafood fillets. Visit coastalmississippi.com and go have some fun for fun's sake.